Welcome back to Zestology, the podcast where I look at energy, vitality and motivation and how you can improve it. I'm Tony Wrighton, and I've been a bit of an electromagnetic field geek for a while, and I realised that sentence may not be the thing that would kind of most excite you about listening to a podcast, but I do think this is one of the most important podcasts that I've ever recorded. The reason that I've been concerned about EMFs is because of the overwhelming evidence from people that I've spoken to on this show and people that I've met here and in the States as well, who talk about the adverse and negative effects that EMFs have on us, short-term and long-term. And I guess it kind of started slowly. I started thinking, oh, maybe I should put my phone into airport mode when I put it into my pocket. And then I started thinking, maybe I shouldn't use the microwave on a regular basis. And then I started to kind of look at kind of bigger stuff and how I could make changes like that. And I've been aware of Daniel DeBaun for quite some time, about 9 months. And I'm so excited because I've been trying to set this interview up for so long that it's finally happened and that you can listen to Daniel talk today. I genuinely think it's one of the most important Zestology podcasts I've recorded. Daniel is a leader in shielding electronic emissions and protecting our bodies from these harmful EMFs. And he also knows more than virtually anyone about what these EMFs actually do. He spent his career as a technical expert in telecommunications. Now he's focused just on pretty much on EMFs from radiation exposure from devices like the phone, the iPad, the thing that you might be listening to this podcast on right now. If it's in your pocket now and it's not in airport mode, I think by the end of this podcast, it might be. So listen on, enjoy today's Zestology, and do me a favor. Don't put that phone in your pocket anymore, or in your bra, or even hold it to the side of your head, unless it's in airport mode. And by the end of the podcast, you'll understand why.
I was somewhat naive. I was in highly technical spots for years, and I was pretty naive about the potential dangers of this stuff. Except I met a guy in Bell Labs years and years ago. He was an expert in this, and he began telling me, never use a cell phone near your head. He wouldn't touch a cell phone. And I said he was crazy. I never really listened to him. And then fast forward recently, over the last several years, my sons were using their laptops on their lap for hours at a time. And my wife says, I want grandchildren. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I know exactly what's the problem. She may be right. And at that time, I really didn't have a real sense of what was going on in the industry. So when I looked into it, I said, let's go buy some technologies that can help us. I couldn't find any. In fact, I found that many of the devices really didn't do what they say that was on the marketplace, nor did they understand the problems. And then I began doing the study, medical pub study work, and I began realizing there's such a preponderance of evidence that electromagnetic radiation, both the extremely low stuff and the radio frequency stuff, can really damage your cell to the extent where it can create, in worst cases, cancers to the body. So that's when I began realizing there was a preponderance of evidence that no one knew about.
That's the science.
Yeah, the science was here. The science knew what was going on. It was the public domain tended not to have an understanding of it, and so that's why you want to think about electromagnetic radiation and the dangers, is because we know a lot about it today. We know that it can create serious problems for the human body.
So you're kind of, I guess, principally day-to-day life, you're talking laptops, mobile phones, microwaves.
Yeah, it's funny. There are two kinds of worries you have with electromagnetic radiation. It's all around us. There are many sources of radiation. The radiation that's around us, the ambient that's in the room, the ambient that's outside, is man-made stuff that we generate using our technologies. And for those technologies, there's not much we really can do. But when we talk about laptops, tablets, cell phones, all of a sudden, they're really close to your body. And by the way, the most dangerous when they're close to your body. And those are the ones I'm talking about. The things that touching your body are the most dangerous. And then you have the other kind that's around you, but less impactful to the body.
So I thought that a good title for this podcast might be, Should You Ever Put Your Phone in Your Pocket?
You never should put your phone in your pocket. And I'll tell you why. The cell phone generates a cell connection. It could generate a Bluetooth signal. It can generate a Wi-Fi signal. There are 3 transmitters coming out of a cell phone potentially. And then you have when those devices operate, they generate themselves an emission as a byproduct of what they do. That's extremely low frequency stuff. And so those devices touching your body can penetrate your body. They're omnidirectional. That means the signals go out into the air, and if it's on your body, it's going into your body, and it's being absorbed by your body. And when it's penetrating that body, there is impact to the cells, the blood, the blood flow, all the mechanics of the body are all being impacted. Some people don't feel it at all. Others feel it a lot. So
some people feel it, but who knows what it's having on our long-term health? Is that what you're saying?
There's no doubt about it. In fact, Tony, talk a little bit more about the technical side. When they created the standards, the world standards, both in the UK and the US, what they looked at was what's the impact of a transmitting signal from a cell phone to the body. What they evaluated was the thermal impact to the body. That is, if that signal was touching your body, we won't let it heat up more than 2 degrees in that area, Celsius, by the way. And so, but they never worried about the biological long-term impacts of that exposure. And in fact, it's really the long-term impacts that you really worry about. And we're only beginning to understand in more clarity what's the real long-term impact. Let me give you an example of what that RF signal, the radio frequency connection to the cell tower is. When you go to a microwave oven and you turn it on and you heat your meat, what you're doing is heating up the water between the cells, and it oscillates the cells, and your meat gets cooked. Well, that's a 2.4 gigahertz signal, and the cell phone is a 1.9 gigahertz. They're very, very, very close. They're known as a thermal emission. RF is a thermal emission. It's a microwave signal. It's a microwave oven signal. And you're putting it to your head. Think about that.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty
so the mobile phone signal is quite close to the microwave signal.
It is virtually the same. Wi-Fi is 2.4 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz. 2 different signals can come out of your Wi-Fi, come out of your cell phone. That is exactly at 2.4 is exactly a microwave oven signal. It's just not as much energy, but it's the same frequency. It's known as the thermal emitting signal.
So going back to kind of, putting your phone in your pocket or holding your phone kind of on your skin, what are the kind of long-term impacts? So you've explained the strength of the signal, but what could that do to the body?
Well, when you put it close to the body like that, maybe nothing happens. Some people don't seem to be affected by it. But more often than not, what happens is the cells are now being hit by the signal. And so one cell is next to another cell and it's saying, I don't like being bombarded by this toxin, because a thermal emission is a toxin to the body, just as the VOC is, volatile organic compound is. And so what happens is the cell tries to resist it. It sort of tries to shield itself from it. When that begins happening, it tingles your hand. It may give you a headache. It may, the skin may get irritated and swell. There's a lot of many symptoms that occur as a result of that exposure. What's actually happening to the cell is it's saying, I'm not going to give my adjacent cell any more protein. That's what's the mechanics. It's actually saying, I'm going to stop working until I don't have this exposure. In worst cases, what happens is the body says, oh my goodness, I'm gonna penetrate the weakened cell membrane. And when it does that, it actually calcium flows into the cell itself, and nitrous oxide and other things sort of build out within the cell. And as that happens, that's when you have mutated cells, DNA damaged cells. It's literally as a result of the constant exposure, long-term exposures, that begins happening.
And do you think that the kind of massive increase in EMFs that we've got in our world that we didn't have 30, 40 years ago might be the cause of a lot of the increases in these chronic and degenerative diseases that we didn't see so much 30, 40 years ago?
Tony, yes, you're absolutely right. ADHD, leukemia. There are so many diseases linked these days to EMF exposure. Well, remember I talked about the ambient?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that's being impacted by the ambient now. And that's those kinds of diseases, which are the increase. The ones that are close to our body, what I haven't mentioned to you is the most susceptible parts of the body with electromagnetic radiation is the frontal lobe. And so for the last 10 years, there's been an average of 2% increase per year on brain cancers. And many scientists say it's because of the exposures. It's consistent with the growth and the increased demand for our cell phones in our modern day.
Wow.
So, yeah, there are clear evidence that there is a growing concern about these kinds of emissions in our lives, and you need to be careful about your environments, both the ambient within the room and those things you keep close to your body.
Wow. So going back to mobile phones in particular, if you put it in your pocket, would it affect a man's sperm count? Would it affect fertility for men and women?
There's no question about that. Within several
There's no question about it.
There's literally no question. There's enough scientific peer-reviewed evidence that says within several hours, 25 male on the average, 25% of the male sperm count is immobile.
What?
Yeah, it's
within a few hours of having a mobile phone.
It's not a debate. It's a scientific evidence that suggests.
Oh no!
But there's another thing that is even. So, you heard me talk about this RF stuff, and then there's a extremely low stuff. Let me explain that to you a tiny bit. Anything under 300 hertz is like the byproduct of stuff working around us. RF, radio frequency stuff, is the stuff we generate to communicate. So the stuff that is a byproduct below 300 hertz, it's measured in milligauss. You don't even need to know that. What you need to know is extremely small amount of milligauss. Your toaster generates 150 milligauss.
Yeah.
Your hairdryer, 150 milligauss. 15 milligauss close to a woman who's pregnant increases the probability of a miscarriage by 3 times. So it's not just the male that's impacted; it's also the female impacted as well about these kinds of exposures.
Okay, I've got a whole list of questions. What about in airport mode? If you put the phone into airport mode and put it into your pocket, is that okay?
No question about that's fine. Why? Because you've taken the transmitter out of the equation. It's not transmitting anymore. It's not omnidirectionally distributing into the room the signal, and you're perfectly fine. But you want to make sure everything is off: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and the cell connection.
Okay.
In fact, as a general rule of thumb, if you really don't need the Wi-Fi and you really don't use the Bluetooth, turn it off and make sure it's off.
Yeah, that's what I do anyway, actually.
Yeah, that's what you want to do, Tony.
You know, I was very keen on these kind of wearable trackers for a while that track your steps in your sleep and everything else. Now, the old school ones, a few years ago, you'd have to plug them into a mobile phone to kind of get the results. Now, almost every single tracker, and there is about one I can think of that doesn't, has Bluetooth in it. Now, they describe Bluetooth as, or the new Bluetooth, as ultra low radiation. And it's a very tiny electromagnetic field. What would you say about that, wearing something with Bluetooth on your skin 24 hours a day?
I was at a yoga class. My teacher came in to me and said, "Look, my new watch I got." And it's transmitting to her cell phone. I said, "What are you, nuts?" You know what I do for a living? The answer is no, you really shouldn't. Even though they're very, very, very low emissions. Here's the way you want to think about it. A cell phone can connect about 4 or 5 miles, U.S. miles. A Wi-Fi can go, 400 or 500 feet. So it's much smaller, less energy, but it's still transmitting. Bluetooth is 10 times less than that. It's really low, but it's always on, and it's always transmitting. It does not transmit. So when you have it on your wrist, it will potentially impact that wrist over time. It's because of the duration. The signal level's low, but there's a long duration that you're wearing it for.
And is there a case of these electromagnetic fields kind of just messing with the body's own system? Because we've got our own EMFs, haven't we? We've got our own electrical field. And presumably our body thinks, hang on, for 20,000 years, we've been getting on quite nicely without all these kind of devices around us. And all of a sudden, this is a bit confusing.
Well, actually, hold on a second. The body is a infrastructure of micron electrons connecting to each other. And so there's electrical infrastructure in place in the body. If I take my cell phone and I put it to my heart, the strength of my arm is less. So it literally influences the impact to my strength in my arm.
Right. That
simple parlor trick is a demonstration of, in fact, the RF signal interfering with the electrical system of the body.
So you were just demonstrating that for people who aren't watching on video. We could actually try that at home, hold the mobile phone to the chest or to the arm and see how strong the arm is.
Right. You can take it on and off and you'll see a difference in strength. It's literally because of the interference of the RF.
Yeah.
Now what we don't know, Tony, is what's the long-term impact of that. I don't think there's enough scientific evidence to say what do we really think is going to happen to that. There's not these linkages to diseases that we know, but when it interferes with the electrical system, it's likely indirect. It's not a direct implication. Direct would be you permanently lose strength. Indirect could be the heart itself is now weakened and has mutated cells as a result of the exposure that was long-term. So we really don't know what the long-term impact is in the electrical system, but there's no doubt it does it. And if you don't believe me, do the parlor trick. You'll see.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am on the page with you very much indeed, Daniel. But, you know, I mean, speaking, kind of giving a voice to the skeptics, they would say companies that sell mobile phones and technology are the most valuable companies in the world. Are they not setting themselves up for a massive kind of, lawsuits and bankruptcy based on what you're saying?
Well, there's no doubt there are factions within the infrastructure, the nations, and messaging that's being controlled, and there are liabilities underlying those kinds of factions. And this is it's been a war in a sense for 30 years about the impact or the lack thereof. So what we are seeing now is really somewhat the early stages of impact, because it's not really been close to our bodies for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been around us. So there is economic reasons why some factions may think they're fine, state they're fine, and some, which are scientific based, may think they're not. I often use cigarette smoking as an example. If you years ago, science knew that there was a direct link to lung cancer when you smoked. In fact, in the late 70s, I remember the chairman of Philip Morris was in front of the UK bunch of physicians that were talking about, is a woman smoking a cigarette who's pregnant in danger? His answer at that time was absolutely not. But the baby will be a little bit smaller. And what woman wouldn't want a smaller baby? It's like,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was like they justified their position. But at that time, we really did know there was a linkage. And then fast forward, now everyone has to have this stamp on their product that says this could endanger you. You can get lucky. So
we're right at the start. We're just at the start of this technology. We don't know what it does.
Right. It's only 10 years you had a cell phone to your head. In fact, let me put it this way. The standards were developed for cell phones 30 some odd years ago. When you have a cell phone to your head, we talked about the thermal impact, and that's what they established as the strength. What that is that signal is allowed to go 1 inch into your head and heat up by 2 degrees of Celsius. And so that standard was based on no long-term use. It was on a 6-foot male that the standard was based on. And it was him occasionally calling his friends. I think back to myself, 30 years ago, I didn't have many friends who had cell phones. So I being occasionally on it, meant once a week, because I had no one to call. Fast forward it, and in extreme contrast, you can have a child that's 7 years old using a cell phone.
Yeah.
Put it to your head. That same signal to get 1 inch into your head goes completely through their head. So all of a sudden, the dynamics of the use has really evolved to the point where there's a whole new class of exposures that we really are beginning to understand only recently.
Wow. And
by the way, I know I got to extend my story a little bit for you, because you never heard me talk about the term cancer related to electromagnetic radiation, because the scientific community's peer-reviewed stuff would identify those as serious kinds of implications with the use of cell phones, and but it wasn't commonly accepted in the marketplace for whatever reason. But this past summer, there was the Institute of Toxicity Program, which is a division of the U.S. government. They did a $25 million epidemiology study. What they did was they created an environment. They took all the ambience out. They had transmitters that they knew what they were, and they knew the location, they knew the populations, and they spent $25 million to study the implications of a 1.9 gigahertz signal, which is a cell phone signal. That was a CDMA type of protocol they used to connect to it. Yeah. And what they found was that there was a direct link between frontal lobe cancer and that signal in their study. And
that was a scientific study.
Peer-reviewed. Government.
Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, to me, it was a surprise as much as it was to the study experts. They found there was a direct link to heart cancer, believe it or not. And the reasons of why are fairly easy to understand. Remember, I talked about the microwave and how it heats up meat?
Yeah.
Well, the softest, most watery stuff we have are the brain and the heart and the sensitive areas of our body. So it sort of makes sense.
Yes.
but it's an epidemiology study that was peer reviewed, and the U.S. government factions who created the study. The guy was brilliant. What he did, he actually took the transmitter and he moved it away from the subject, far enough away so he removed the thermal impact and only had a biological impact.
Right.
The guy was brilliant because the standard was around the impact of thermal. If it's far enough away, there is no thermal impact. So he removed it, and so the study was purely
on EMFs, yeah.
Purely on the impact of EMF long-term to the body.
Interrupting this podcast quickly to remind you that it is brought to you by the Human Charger, which is a revolutionary device for your well-being. It shines light directly to the light-sensitive regions of your brains, and it doesn't do this by using your eyes. It does this by using your ears, right where it's needed the most. Your lug holes. So you've got a Human Charger in, shining light into your ears, and it helps you with energy, vitality, and motivation. The exact kind of thing that we look at in this podcast. When these photosensitive areas of the brain are activated by the Human Charger, something amazing happens. And it's incredible that they've worked this out and that you can do this in the ear. You release the chemical compounds serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. And what that does is increase your energy, increase your mood, increase your alertness, and help with jet lag as well. So there's a whole load of stuff that's going on, all because you're shining a bit of light into your ears. If you fancy getting involved with the Human Charger, you can. They have given me, and therefore you, because you listen to this podcast, a 20% discount. It's quite a big discount from the Human Charger people. If you just head to humancharger.com/Tony and use the code ZEST2017, then that will help you with the winter blues, with a bit more energy. And if you want my honest opinion, find the first Instagram post that I ever wrote after I used this for the first time, which is probably about a year and a half ago. There's a kind of inexplicable, mild, but very nice increase in energy. This podcast is also supported by Bulletproof Coffee and Supplements. Simply use the code Zestology at checkout for 10% off if you'd like to get involved. Bulletproof is obviously Dave Asprey's company, and in fact, Dave wrote the foreword for Daniel DeBaun, today's podcast guest on Zestology, for his new book, which is coming out very soon, which he talks about in the second half of the podcast on EMFs. There's some great supplements on the site for upgrading mind and body as well. I use a whole host of the Bulletproof stuff every day. If you head to bulletproof.com and bulletproof.co.uk, you'll find out a bit more about Dave Asprey. And if you want to use the code Zestology, you'll get 10% off. Back to the show. So I shudder to think about the amount of days and hours that I've sat with my laptop on my lap. Since last summer, I've been using, because you're, as well as having written a book, and you're kind of acknowledged as one of the foremost experts in the world on this issue. You're also CEO of DefenderShield, aren't you? And I've been using DefenderShield, which is this kind of pad that goes under your laptop. And just from a warmth perspective, you notice that, in the past when I sat there with my laptop, it was so hot on my lap, and now you don't feel that. So just that alone, I noticed the difference.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got to tell you the story. It was several years ago. My wife says, I want grandchildren. Remember, I told you that story?
Yeah.
We went to try to look around for something. I couldn't find anything that was truly legitimate science in play. So I said, well, I can invent it. I used to work for Bell Labs many years ago. Bell Labs was one of the research companies in the country that began the telephone networks that we have.
Yeah.
And the most sophisticated advanced research in the world when they existed. And so they had generated a lot of different technologies, which were shielding technologies. So when we couldn't find anything, I said, well, I know what we can use. So we put together a variety of different layers of materials known to shield various aspects of the spectrum, the RF, the extreme low frequency stuff. So but by the time the transmitted signal was all the way through, it didn't exist anymore. And I wanted to protect my boys.
Great.
Because they were younger. And that's actually how we started. It was a self-defense thing. We said, well, we want grandchildren. So that's why we literally created the Defender. Their friends wanted them. Their friends of friends wanted them. So we started building. Then we started building more and more to protect all aspects of the transmissions close to the body. And that's how we started.
Yeah, great. So what are some of the other things then? I feel like I'm absolutely sold on EMFs and the dangers. What are some of the other things, apart from kind of putting a DefenderShield under our laptop, that we can do, practical tips on a day-to-day basis to limit our exposure to EMFs, the kind of things that you do on a day-to-day basis?
It's funny. You've heard me say this throughout the chat. Let me reinforce. There are very few things you have to worry about. You think of the amount of time you are exposed, and the position, the distance you're at from it. So if you are 10 foot away from a router and there's nothing you have to do, you could be there 24 hours a day and you're safe. In fact, the rule of thumb is if you are 1 foot from a signal of the device type, 80% of that danger is gone. By 4 foot, 98%. So all you got to do is put it away from you a little bit.
So that's the mobile phone, the laptop.
Right. Yeah.
Just put it further away.
Just put it a little bit away and you're fine. There's really no, the dangers are diminished substantially because now the signals, our signal exponentially drops in power levels.
Okay.
It substantially drops. That's why.
What you mean? As soon as you move away from it, it just drops a lot.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So there's not that same kind of danger to the cells.
So if you put your phone in your bag, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you use a speakerphone, you don't need any protection. Great. No device at all, because it's at least 1 foot away. If you do it, if you take a cell phone and put it to your head and use it for 2 minutes, and you don't need protection if that's the duration of time. It's when you use it for 15 minutes, when you use it for half an hour.
Yeah,
that's when the danger is long term to the cells.
Right. Okay, I've got a couple of other questions. Headphones. I have read in the past that whilst headphones might seem like a good idea, the wires actually connect the electromagnetic field up the headphones into your head. Is that true?
There's absolutely no doubt it's true.
Oh, dear.
Let me give you a relative.
Oh, dear. More bad news, Daniel.
Keep on wearing those earbuds. They're doing well for you. But when you use a cell phone directly to your head, that's the worst you can have. If you were to get a set of earbuds and plug it in, that's much more safe than if you had it on your head. So it's very good. But like Bluetooth, this is really low stuff. Energy, there's energy being emitted, extremely low frequency energy that's being emitted. And remember, the duration of time is potentially for a while. So yes, you want to be careful about that. And my suggestion is don't use Bluetooth long term, because all of a sudden that's becoming an exciting technology.
Well, they brought out those new Bluetooth headphones and people just walk around with them all day.
Right.
But again, that's right into your skull.
Right. Literally.
Yeah.
We're going directly into the body like that for long durations. And so the rules of thumb, keep away from it. If you are close to it, stay there a short period of time. And you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, because they sell those headphones called air headphones, don't they? Which transmit, instead of through metal, they transmit sound through air.
Yeah, they use an acoustical link. We actually have them. Where they
you sell them as well, do you? Yeah.
We have an acoustical link between the electronics and the earbuds. We eliminate all the current flow that's going along those lines.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And one other, I'd like to, a couple of seconds more about things to do. The way you want to, if you think of a transmitter, a cell phone transmitter as a bee, and it's in your room, one bee won't kill you.
Yeah.
If you have 1,000 bees, Wi-Fi, cell phone, tablet, all these transmitting sources, that's what is known as 1,000 bees. 1,000 bees can kill.
Yeah.
So all you got to remember is turn off the bees.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. Turn off the router at night. I have a timer on my router.
So do I. I have a little timer. £2 it cost me, and it just goes off at midnight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a simple thing to do. If you're going to have it in your office, have it about 10 foot away, and you're perfectly fine. Don't put it next to your head. It's simple, practical things, you know?
One of the things that I'm quite keen on doing is buying an electric car, because I feel like, or a hybrid car, because I feel like that'd be very good for the environment. And I got quite close to buying one, and I started doing some research on the EMFs in cars and electric cars. And it seems to me that cars that use an electric battery as an engine, not only are the EMFs a lot more, but the metal of the car seems to act as a bit of a conductor for the electromagnetic fields. What's your view on that?
Yeah. We talked about a byproduct of current flow, right? Extremely low frequency emissions is a byproduct of current flow. When you have a motor and you generate power, a byproduct of that coils rotating is electromagnetic radiation, extremely low frequency stuff. So most people think of that as AC, alternating current. In a car, it's DC, direct current. But it is an emission that's coming out of those motors. You have current flow from the battery that is generating electromagnetic radiation that's DC. My personal opinion, I'd be careful about that, because in science, there's a debate about the impact of DC generated electromagnetic radiation and AC, to the extent where I don't even think it's a well-known, well-understood, well-thought-through problem that needs to be resolved. So I would be careful about those kinds of exposures. And they are high. Anytime you have a motor running on any battery source of power, there's always emissions.
But from what you're saying, that sounds like all cars. So but you're talking specifically about battery-powered cars or all cars?
No, I'm talking about the electric car.
Yeah.
Having now predominantly all source of power from a battery, and the engine source are motors that can convert that DC power into energy at the wheels. But to differentiate from that with a car, a general car that uses a gas engine, they have motors too. They generate, but because they're so small and so few, it's much less a problem than you typically find
in a battery
in an electrical car. Right.
Yeah, I hope that's something that the manufacturers will look at with electric cars.
Well, I know we get asked that question quite often, and the manufacturers that the best I know, they've not addressed it. It's a fairly complicated problem, an engineering problem.
Okay. What about other solutions? My day job is that I'm a presenter at a TV channel here in the UK, and I love the job and I don't want to give it up, but I have a feeling that this is one of the most EMF-rich environments in the country. There's
1,000 bees in a room. 1,000 bees in a room.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? There's no windows. There's screens everywhere. I have to wear a couple of kind of packs, electrical packs on my body while I'm kind of presenting.
Right.
Is there anything I've seen? I'm interested in kind of mitigating or limiting the risks of exposure whilst I'm working for kind of 5 hours at a time doing this job. I've seen a couple of things. You can put stickers on phones and electrical equipment, which I'm not quite sure if they work or not. What are those stickers? Are they any good?
Here's the answer. Anytime you look for any product that makes a claim about shielding performance, or any other claim for that matter, you really want to make sure that is documented with independent study by a legitimate study shop. In many of the buttons that I've seen, there's no such study.
Right.
And in fact, without a study, I can't compare. And certainly the argument, oftentimes for me, is not a scientific argument.
Okay.
I don't see those arguments as legitimate. For example, they talk about, I modify the transmitting signal. That way it doesn't hurt your cells. Well, when you transmit to a cell tower, it is a receiver at the other end. It can only look at a frequency that's identified structurally as accurate.
Yeah.
If you can make the call, what do you think it's doing to your cell? It's still hitting your cell. I don't care what argument you're on. If it's connecting, and you said you changed it, you didn't. It's connecting. So you really want to be careful about devices that make claims like that.
There's one that I've just got up on my screen now that I was looking at, which I thought might be a good one if it worked, and it's called a Blue Shield Tesla Gold Series Mini. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
You have it on you hold it, and it's designed for people who are exposed to cell towers nearby or smart meters and smartphones. It's a portable model, and it basically protects you from the harmful effects of EMF, uses multiple waveforms that have been engineered to be precise and effective in harmony with the body, and also to obey the body's natural rhythms and cycles.
It doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay.
It means nothing. There's no such thing as rhythm with a 60 cycle signal.
Yeah.
Or with a 1.9 signal. There's no such thing. Look at it this way. If you have that device and it's to your left, and I put this to my head, to my right,
yeah,
where do you think the signal's going?
Yeah.
Are you protected in harmony?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You're not in harmony with anything. It's penetrating your cells.
Right. Yeah. Okay. What about? Okay. So if I'm wearing, I'm at work. I'm wearing these kind of packs. Is there anything else I can do to kind of mitigate the exposure? Or people are living close to, I don't know, like electricity pylons, or they have to use a certain amount of electrical equipment in their job, as many of us do, or they just kind of go around with their laptop and there's just no way of practically kind of limiting that exposure.
When you have those kinds of exposures, predominantly they're RF. They're not extremely low frequency that you have to worry about so much, but it's the RF transmitters. That thing you wear on your belt,
yeah,
it is a wired connection to a transmitter that's connecting to something else. So that is likely, without me knowing much about it, it is an RF signal.
They're called RF. And then a certain number, so they're definitely RF, yeah. Yeah,
so what you do is you can actually shield RF fairly straightforwardly. We use fairly sophisticated stuff, but literally a couple of pieces of aluminum between your device and your body creates a shielding.
Right.
To some extent.
Yeah.
Which actually may work for those circumstances. Yeah.
So some kind of aluminium foil underpants would be perfect.
Right. Why did I say that? Because RF is conductive. It looks for a current. It looks for a path to be conduct to. So it will find that path. If there are other devices that I don't think are proven. I know the source of the materials, though. They have clothing that they talk about that has the shielding. That's mesh shielding.
Okay.
That's not the best, but it's better than nothing.
Okay, I'm making a note of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually something. It's a mesh silver shielding typically.
Okay.
And that may help you.
But none of those buttons, you're not convinced by any of those? Or
I know
the devices? Yeah.
We tested many of those kinds of products, and they leak terribly.
Okay.
They make claims, but they're not justifiable claims.
Yeah, yeah. What about, I mean, I have got one of, because I've got your DefenderShield and I've got one of your iPhone cases as well. If only I had something like that worked for the RF device, that would be great, wouldn't it?
That would be perfect. Yeah. If you were to take a DefenderShield, cut it off where it's pivoting, and put it in between you and the device, it would work fine.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
all you got to do is create a barrier between the two.
Okay, I'm gonna get some DIY skills on the go. That's great. And then what about underfloor heating? Do we need to worry about that?
Well, there's hot water-based systems, which of course you don't have to worry about at all.
Yeah.
The electrical ones, they generate extremely low frequency stuff. And they do that because there's current flow. And so to answer your question, yes, there is an emissions. They can do things to help reduce that emission, but in general, I don't believe I know of anybody who does.
Okay.
So I would be careful about putting electric-based heater in the floor.
Yeah. And smart meters. The electricity companies are very keen on getting us to install smart meters and making it seem like it's good for us. Is it good for us?
The answer is absolutely not, except distance. If it's in the corner of your house that's next to your garage and there's 30 feet between you, that device, and your family, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go nuts. If it is put on the outside wall next to your bedroom, 3 feet away where your head is, I'd be worried about it.
Why is that? Because is it sending out a continuous message?
Right. Actually, those devices send out, they typically send out timed messaging. They every second, every other second, every other hour, every other 3 hours, depending on the manufacturer, they transmit. And so they're not like a cell phone that can be constant or Wi-Fi that can be constant. They are in the same RF range as Wi-Fi and cell phone. And they are a B. And if it's close to you, it is a problem if you have multiple Bs. In fact, it's a problem if you're sleeping at night and you're 3 foot away. I wouldn't panic about it if it's on the side of my garage and being transmitted at night. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's more of a worry than a reality.
Okay. And then I guess by the same token, if you've got a Wi-Fi router in your room by your head, move it somewhere else.
Don't ever sleep with a router in your room, period. Don't ever have a bunch of clocks in your room and your cell phone on the night table. Not good. And the simple reason is we haven't spoke about all the various impacts it may have on the body, but RF screws around with your melatonin. So it really says, you want to go to sleep? Well, not now, because I'm going to screw around with your melatonin. So it really does disrupt your sleep patterns.
Yeah.
And so you always want to be cautious. Remove the bees in the room.
Daniel, this has been, I think, one of the most important interviews I've done. Thank you so much for coming on Zestology. I do appreciate it. Something I've asked everybody is, what is one book that you would recommend and one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation? So kind of any book that's had a resonance in terms of the work and research that you've done, and then one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation. You've obviously given us quite a few already.
It's funny. There are not many books in this space that I would recommend. But there are several. Actually, Ollie Johnston out of Sweden, he does incredible work.
You don't have to be modest on this, though, Daniel, because I think you are bringing out a book quite soon, aren't you?
Oh yeah. Well,
so yeah. Don't be modest about this. You're very welcome to
recommend. Tony, is Radiation Nation. It's a book that I've written and authored, and it is a complete study work, up to date, of the problems and issues related to electromagnetic radiation you find in the market today. And I'll tell you why I wrote that, Tony. I was so frustrated with the lack of understanding of the impact to the body, even what it was. People used to come to me and say it's not ionized radiation, so it's not damaging. What the heck are you talking about? Non-ionizing radiation can screw you up just as much as ionized radiation. X-rays versus this stuff. So I really put a book together, and my whole goal was to describe to the environment what it is we live in, so we understand it a little bit, and we can take actions by ourselves. And that's why I came up with Radiation Nation. And it's about to be released, Tony. We're probably 15 days away.
Oh, great. Well, by the time this goes out, that will be out then. So that's fantastic. And I am going to be absolutely the first in the queue to buy a copy, because I'm just super interested in this area. And I just think there's so much more to learn. I mean, the impact on libido, we haven't even discussed, but presumably there is an impact between EMF and libido, especially for men.
No question about it. All of these impacts are well understood.
Insomnia as well?
Yes. That's the melatonin, screwing around with your melatonin.
Wow.
Yeah. But there are so many. ADHD with kids. That's why I get infuriated about the 1,000 transmitters in a room, in classroom, because all the kids are being forced to use tablets to do classwork. And they're exposed to all these transmitters in a room. It's crazy.
Wow. Daniel, I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Radiation Nation, and it will be out when people listen to this. And what would be the one tip then for living with more energy, vitality and motivation?
Live healthy. Be aware. One of the simplest things you can do is try to understand the environments you find yourself in and take actions to deal with them in a healthy way. That goes for everything. Make sure you have your exercise, balanced eating, a good understanding on the environment you live in. So I would say healthy living wisely.
Brilliant. Daniel, thank you. It's been great to chat to you.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate you inviting us on.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you. And just before you go, where can people find out more about you and the book and DefenderShield and everything else?
We actually have a website, Tony. It's DefenderShield.com. We actually have a preponderance of information about the subjects. We don't just sell products. We actually try to help people understand the problems. And by the way, we actually ship to the UK all the time.
Do you really?
We really do. It's sort of amazing. In fact, we began selling more products in Europe than we did in the US when we started. Why? Because the Europeans seem to know what they're doing and understand their life a little bit better than the US do.
Yeah. I've seen these green waves advertised around the place. Green wave. What is that? That's certain devices that you can use to clean up your environment. Is that something that's bigger in the UK than the US, or?
It is. Those are grounding devices. And believe it or not, I have debates all the time with the world experts on that subject matter. And it was the argument I showed you. When you put this to your head and you say
Yeah.
something over there, it's doing nothing for you.
Okay.
If you put a grounding device at your feet and you have no shoes on, there's better balance because the energy that the body absorbs as a capacitor is discharged, finding a path to ground.
Right.
But that stuff, that tends to be more on working with properly grounding. And it works for some, it doesn't work for others.
Okay. Daniel, great to talk to you. Have a good day. And I hope we can speak again at some point in the future. It's been really good.
No problem at all, Tony. I appreciate you inviting me.
That's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much to Daniel for coming on. I've got an action list of things that I need to go and sort out. I stopped using the microwave a little while ago, probably about 9 months ago. Before that, I only used it to warm up sweet potatoes. But even now, I mean, the thought of doing that just doesn't feel good. And now I've got a pressure cooker, which is about as quick anyway, but doesn't put any harmful EMFs in. So it's all kind of little steps. And I feel sometimes when you look at an issue like this, it can be quite overwhelming to think, God, where do I start? But just putting it into airport mode, even at night, just putting your phone into airport mode and starting there, I guess, is a good start. So thank you to Daniel for coming on, and let me know what you think and if you make any changes as well. This podcast is brought to you by the Human Charger, because the main problem with life, especially in winter as it is in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, is just a lack of daily sunlight. If only it was a little bit more sunny here at the moment. In fact, could say that about London in general. If only it was more sunny, it'd be the most amazing place to live. So when you haven't got enough natural light, you can use the Human Charger instead. It provides you with the daily dosage of light that you need in just 12 minutes of use, and you stick it into your ear. For more on that, you can head to just humancharger.com/Tony and use the code ZEST2017 for 20% off. And you'll be using a device that I've got and I use quite a bit, and I used on my recent holiday for jet lag as well, and lots of other people do too. This podcast is also brought to you by bulletproof.com and bulletproof.co.uk, where you can find all manner of things, not just coffee and coffee technology, but a whole host of different supplements, merchandise, gift accessories, and a lot of stuff on nutrition. They've just brought out a new supplement line, 5 different supplements, all of the stuff made from the highest quality ingredients that is going to help power your mind and body. So it's kind of great, because getting kind of people who would support the show, companies that support the show, was never a massive priority for me, actually. The main, and even now, the main priority is to grow the show, get the information out there, share this knowledge, and have a lot of fun personally making this podcast. But the fact that I've got 2 supporters of the podcast that are so in line with my values and the show's values is pretty cool as well. So if you want to head to bulletproof.com and bulletproof.co.uk, the code Zestology will get you 10% off. 10% off on everything apart from the ghee. I'm not quite sure why you don't get 10% off on the ghee, but I might need to ask. I need to ask the Bulletproof guys on that. So if you want the ghee, you'll have to pay full price for it, and it is great, and I do use the ghee. Sorry, I can't get you 10% off the ghee, but everything else it works for 10% off. That's it. Thank you for listening. Just before I go, I want to tell you about a couple of the guests that I have coming up. I have Manny Sethi coming up in the next few weeks. He is the brother of New York Times bestselling author Ramit Sethi. Manish has been on the podcast before. He's an incredible and inspiring individual, and he has this device called the Pavlok. Remember us talking to the guy about the Pavlok? Gives you a small little electric shock every time you do something you don't want to do. Yeah, Manish, he's great. Also got Tim Gray and Dr. Rob Pender coming on. They run London's premier, and I think only, hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Amazing what this can do for your health and well-being. Got Dr. Stephen Simpson coming on again. He's a Zestology regular. He's been on 3 or 4 times already, and we're talking about motivation and music. And I've got Laura Coe, who's also been on Zestology before, and she has a midlife crisis prevention strategy. She's awesome. I think Laura's just absolutely brilliant, and she'll be on very soon on Zestology as well. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.